and reviewed Kenya-Morocco relations, the recent pact between Mombasa County and Morocco on fostering tourism, the impact of development cooperations within the two states, as well as escalating Western Sahara conflict. Listen.
My name is Al-Mukhtar Gambu. I've been here more than 4 years, and my background, I'm an academician. So I was a professor at Yale University, and then when I went back to Morocco in 2011, I became a member of the parliament. So I never thought, of course, of actually sort of shifting to these fields. And after I ended my term at the parliament, and then I was appointed by His Majesty King Mohammed VI as ambassador of the Kingdom of Morocco to Kenya and Burundi.
Balozi, let us start this discussion by, you describing Morocco to Kenyans. What interesting things should they know?
Morocco is an open country. It's a liberal country. It's one of the major touristic destinations in Africa. As you know, for example, Morocco attracts up to 14 million tourists annually. We are a bridge between Europe and Africa, between South and North, and we are also a bridge between the West, which is the United States, and the East, the Middle East.
Diplomacy before was more or less focused on politics. Things have since changed. Talk to us about the shifting meaning of diplomacy.
Yeah, diplomacy is a broad word. It's really, anybody who is going to tell you diplomacy is ABC is wrong. Diplomacy keeps shifting. We have diplomacy of the Second World War, we have the diplomacy of the Cold War, and we have the diplomacy of current times. So diplomacy is usually seen as an official relation between the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in given countries. But now it's really evolving in a sense to include more agencies, to include more institutions, more people. And now the impact now is seen all over the world. Now, and one of the other major components of this new diplomacy that is emerging is the diaspora. In the Moroccan context, the diaspora is making, as I said, is becoming a major power in our diplomatic relations, especially with Europe. We have about 6 million Moroccans living abroad.
Rabat has been on a diplomatic charm offensive in the continent after 33 years being in the cold. Let us engage about the issue to do with Pan-Africanism and Morocco's Africa-focused diplomacy.
Pan-Africanism cannot be reduced to institutions. Pan-Africanism cannot be monopolized, for example, by institutions like the African Union. It goes beyond the confines of institutions. For me, when I go into a cafe in Morocco, right, and I see Moroccans sitting in a cafe and watching the Olympics or watching the World Championship of track and field, and see them clapping for a Kenyan champion, right? Whether it's Paul Tergat or before then it was Renault. That's actually an expression of Pan-Africanism, even if there were no direct ties between the two countries, but you have that feeling of Pan-Africanism emerging. So we should look at these examples. When you look also at novels people read, and Ngugi is read in Morocco, and you see that people really they are so engaged in understanding and discovering and exploring, not just about Kenya, but a part of themselves as Africans.
Is Morocco trying to redefine herself, or rather position herself as a continental leader?
What I see in the ground is really like the signs of leadership, and there are even many intellectuals here in Kenya who agree with me that when I ask them about, when I explain about South-South cooperation, they say your king is a leader, meaning in the sense that his philosophy is first to give confidence to Africa. I mean, His Majesty always insists on Africa for the Africans. If there is a problem that is African, let's find a solution that is also African, right? He puts the human being, His Majesty puts the African citizen, especially the youth, at the center of any economic or social policy.
Balozi, you've talked of African problems getting African solutions. And 4 years down the line, since Morocco was readmitted back to the continental body, African Union, what is your take on the African Union? Has it been able to live up to its task?
In certain areas, definitely. I mean, it was able. There are so many areas where African Union made a difference, but there are others where it did not. And what makes us sometimes frustrated is the fact that our problems, we don't recognize them until the European media start talking about them, until we have, like, for example, illegal migrants coming from sub-Saharan Africa trying to cross, and 20 or 30 tragic deaths, right? And you see, and all of a sudden you see, like, the European Union, for example, trying to really sort of tackle it. Sure, then it becomes an issue. But the sad thing is that these problems exist, and the African Union should be a little bit more engaged with them before they reach out to the world, right? So that's an example, like things. What I want to say is that as if our problems become more legitimate when they are known to Europe or to the United States, not when they are actually discussed by Africa. Two, African Union, I believe, and this is actually part of why we left the African Union in 1984. It was a different thing. It was, African Union was not independent then. It was still actually living under the influence of this Cold War, however you are, who is pro-American, who is pro-Soviet. So that's actually why Morocco left for this issue of Sahara. Finally, it came back, right? Because we thought that actually it was not neutral in that sense, what I told you, like getting into this Cold War politics, siding with each other. We forgot the fact that actually the African Union's first mandate is to really reinforce the territorial integrity of all the member states. This is a must, because our territorial integrity is still a big question. Why? There is still the consequences of the divide and rule policy.
Balozi, Kenya and Morocco have been enjoying long history of relations, despite the thorny issue of Western Sahara, which at one time threatened to sour relations between the two countries, when Nairobi allowed, the self-proclaimed Sahrawi Democratic Republic to open an embassy in Nairobi in 2014. Engage to us more about the relations between Kenya and Morocco. How are they now compared to before?
Kenya and Morocco should be ideal partners. Why? I told you about how Morocco lobbied for the independence of Kenya. I told you about the friendship, special friendship between Jomo Kenyatta and the King Hassan II. And there is also another chapter, because I'm an academic, so I try to find all things that actually would really would actually sort of help me understand the relationship between the two, is Ibn Battuta. All your school children know about Ibn Battuta. Some of them don't know that he comes from Morocco, but he came from Tangiers, and in the 14th century, right? So it's something incredible, and we have to celebrate. Why? Because at that time there is no such thing as exploring Africa without falling into negative stereotypes, whether Africans are humans or not. Ibn Battuta came in the 14th century. He came to Mombasa. It was actually from Lamu to Mombasa, and he stayed for some time, which gives you an idea how Kenya itself was important in his imagination, representing the imagination of the nation at that time. So in comparison to many explorers from Europe, Ibn Battuta was a humanist, was somebody who was curious about the Kenyan culture. He wrote beautiful words about his stay in Mombasa. And back then you would feel that actually, the point, sometimes diplomats need to go to history to actually firm up their work in the present. And this inspires me to talk first about how Kenyan-Moroccan relations, they are actually older than we think. I sent a delegation of your colleagues, of journalists from Kenya, to go to the Sahara, because I didn't want to all the time try to really explain what it is. And believe me, when they came back, they were shocked, because what they heard is not what they saw. Because I usually tell, whoever now tells me this Sahara, I ask him, can you please, especially if he or she is a decision maker, why don't you go to the Sahara itself and look with your own eyes where it is? First, geography is very important. You will see that people are extremely happy, that there is absolutely no difference between the Sahara and the rest of the Moroccan regions, right? So if you want me to talk about these journalists when they came back, because they came here, all of a sudden they became convinced. I didn't do much. They just saw, they thought that it's just a land where there is war, but there is a human rights violation, there is this and that, and they could not even distinguish, and this is what they told me, they could not distinguish really ethnically who is Moroccan, who is a Sahrawi, who is a Moroccan from the north. So right there, they come up with this answer. And of course that explains why, when I talk about the Sahara, this is actually talking about separatism. It's not, even if there is this pseudonym of the Arab Sahrawi Democratic Republic, this is just a misleading term. This is a separatist movement, right? And unfortunately, most of the people, when they talk about the Sahara, they talk about 5% of the truth. Why? They just talk about the Tindouf camps where the separatist leaders live, right? 5%, this is what they believe is representative of the Sahara. They forgot actually the vast majority of the people we are talking about here. They are in Morocco, right? They participate in the elections, and if I wish, I would ask any delegation from Kenya to go and just find out, or double check with what I'm saying. The governors are, they have like the equivalent of the governors here. They are presidents of the regions, they are Sahrawi. We have ministers who are from the Sahara, just as they are from my part of Morocco, right? Sometimes they say because all this problem was made because that part was colonized by Spain, and the Polisario separatists sometimes to say that we have a Spanish culture, whatever. They want to differentiate from the fact that Morocco was occupied by France. I came from northern Morocco, and northern Morocco was also occupied by Spain. So why it's in the south and it's not in the north? I say separatism. So when I say 5%, they know that Tindouf camps, they are in southern Algeria. They are not in Morocco, right? And sometimes we ask, these are refugees. That's what sometimes the UN describes them, the African Union, of course. But I would challenge anybody with this kind of status. The refugee, in order to be a refugee, you need to have a status, right? You need to have rights. What are these rights? Free movement, census, right? And liberty of expression. These Sahrawis who are actually kept in the camps, they are not allowed. They are deprived of these three rights. So you would never know how they look at themselves. One, right of mobility. Imagine that the Algerian, because it is Algeria, I would say it is Algeria that created this problem in the Cold War for its own personal reasons of leverage or whatever. Even that the embassy you talked about was opened here. The money came from Algeria, right? Even if Algeria says itself that I'm sure have nothing to do with it. This is completely false, right? And so just allow these Sahrawis, these are Moroccans, kept hostages in the camps, allow them to express themselves, allow them also to move. And I would challenge anybody, if anybody is going to stay in those camps, especially young people. This is a problem that shouldn't be there, and now it lasted more than 45 years.
Balozi Kenya in March 2021 chaired the African Union Peace and Security Council, which over the years has been, supporting the Western Sahara quest for self-determination, a proposal that has been backed by the African Union Peace and Security Council. What is Morocco's take?
We always expected Kenya to really work for that. Why? It's neutrality, not siding with Algeria or with anybody, but just pushing for the peace process as according to the United States, the United Nations resolutions, right? And then the African Union, you are talking about the month of March, that's where Kenya was chairing the meeting, then it surprised everybody. What then happened? I mean, I don't know to what extent I can say the truth from my own perspective, but I think the point about Algeria, I know that your government has a special relation with Algeria. Of course, it's legitimate. We also have a relation with Algeria. I mean, we still have an embassy there, so it's not the relations I cut, even if they refuse to open the borders between our two countries. But when you see that Kenya is looking at the Algerian point of view, right, without discussing with Morocco, I think this is either a misunderstanding or this is misunderstanding, or this is just pleasing Algeria on this particular issue. And what is the impact of this on our cooperation? It really ruins it, because Algeria has absolutely no interest in seeing Morocco present economically in Kenya or in East Africa. So it always goes to this issue of the Sahara to inflame the relations between our two countries. But the facts are there. United Nations has its own record, and one other reason that would encourage Kenya to really sort of change its position, which we believe sometimes is hostile, is the recognition of the United States. This is a major UN Security Council member. And you have special relations with the United States. You're actually negotiating right now, you are negotiating a free trade agreement with. And I even sat with the American ambassador, the previous American ambassador, to create some sort of a tripartite commission to discuss your free trade agreement with the United States. Why? Because Morocco was the first African country to sign the free trade agreement in 2006. So we wanted to help Kenya how to negotiate better, because we did it, so we have something to offer Kenya. And unfortunately, the Sahara comes in. I don't know if it's going to continue, knowing now that you are a non-permanent UN member. So we really expect Kenya, we expect Kenya to really change its position, right? Because even your leaders, if you talk about, for example, Raila Odinga, the ex-prime minister, he went to the Sahara. Raphael Tuju went to the Sahara. They all saw with their own eyes. So they can come back with a report speaking about what it is. Is it self-determination? What do people want in the Sahara? They would tell you right away that actually there is absolutely none of these questions are being asked. I said this is a separatist issue, and Kenya, when I speak about the danger of separatism in the Tindouf camps, the Polisario, I speak about many countries in Africa. Nobody is safe from separatism in our continent, right? And there are at least 23 separatist movements in Africa. Some of them are dormant, some are active. What makes the difference here? How do they move from being dormant to active? Very easy. Like in the case of the Sahara. Do you imagine if Algeria was not trying to create, fund, sponsor the Polisario separatists, that it would have existed? Absolutely not. Look at the Catalonia. They had all these norms, democratic process, they voted people, this and that. They had like what they believed to be their own language, their own institutions, whatever. And yet, their separatist projects completely failed. Why? Because not one single country backed them or supported them. This is what makes difference in separatist movement. Without the interference of a neighboring country, this Sahara or any other separatist cause would have never existed. So now I really, for the sake of really seeing a different relation between Kenya and Morocco, because they have so many things where they can work together, they are going to set an example for the African continent. Because why? They are regional.